Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the Off the Charts podcast. I'm your host, Amber.
And I'm your other co-host, Jasma, and we're very excited to have our special guest today, Brielle Robillard.
Brielle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk with you two today and, inform our audience about everything.
Oh, amazing. We are so excited, and we thank you so much for being here and spending the time to talk with us. So we are going to get right into it. Before we get into our amazing conversation, we're going to give you guys a little bit more of a background on Brielle and some of her professional work in the arts industry. So Brielle is a professional actress and amateur filmmaker and writer, and she's been working with Multimedia since she was only 9 years old. She started a variety of projects as an actor. Some recently have been the feature film The Silencing, which came out in 2020, starring Game of Thrones alumni Nikolaj Coster-Waldau and Peaky Blinders star Annabelle Wallis. I had to add in Annabelle Wallis because I'm a huge Peaky fan, so I was incredibly excited when I heard about that. She's also currently starring in the CBC series Endlings and has guest starring roles this year in Nurses and the Netflix original Creeped Out, among many other credits she's garnered.
She has also worked on her own film projects, one of which have garnered her the Best Canadian Short Work Award at the Whistler Film Festival, and she also has a new short film that she's been working on which will be released in May. At only 17 years old, she has already been able to make such a profound impact by combining her experience and passions for the media arts into founding her own company that launched in August named BRYYZ, which we're going to dive into later on. So that was a lot of information, but hopefully that gave you a good background information on who she is. So Brielle, we just wanted to ask you to get things started. What drew you into the arts professionally, and how did you get to where you are today?
Great question. First, thanks so much for that intro. You make me sound so fancy. I should take you guys everywhere. I mean, geez. So what drew me to the arts originally? It's actually kind of a funny story. When I was younger, I always loved performing. I'm a really outgoing and kind of, empathetic, compassionate person. I was the kind of kid that showed up with like turtlenecks and combat boots and sundresses to school. Like my parents knew from an early age that I was probably going to end up in the arts. It was kind of a fluke that I always wanted to be an actor, and I kind of hounded my parents for a long time about it. And they were like, absolutely not. I am not driving you everywhere for auditions. And then we had contracting happening in our backyard. And I met all these guys. And while they were on smoke breaks, great parenting award goes to my family, I would go out there and chat with everybody. And it was so funny because they were working on my now agent's backyard at the time. And they were like, oh, like, you seem to love all this stuff. And I was talking to them about how I'm going to be a famous actress and all this stuff. And then that landed me an interview with my current agent. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
Wow. So completely, you weren't kidding when you said fluke, like completely out of nowhere.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I was like, I was photoshopping photos of myself on the red carpet with Meryl Streep from a young age. But as far as the professional acting goes, it was definitely kind of a fun, helpful accident.
That's amazing. So, you were kind of saying how your parents were really like, no, not happening, not at all.
Yeah.
So, how did that change? Was that because you got the agent, or was it, something that you did that they saw like, wow, you really can do this? Like, how did that transition happen?
As a master manipulator, no, I'm kidding. I really was, honestly, it was just a lot of bombarding. I was so obsessed with just being a performer and acting and being creative all the time that when this opportunity arose, my family was like, you know what, you have to go. Like, this is a sign. Go audition. And when it happened, my mom is also really creative. She loves film and all of that. So once it started, my family was really all in. They were like, you go, girl. I think for most kids, if you're thinking about going into acting, you should understand that it's a tough thing to get into. You are most of the time driving into auditions on like a day notice and, memorizing 8-page scripts in 2 days. And it's a lot of work that I didn't think I necessarily knew going into it. But my parents were really helpful once it started.
Do you think you faced any sort of outside pressure that made you kind of doubt whether or not you wanted to take this as like your full-time career? Or is there any other types of fields that you could have gone into?
Yeah, amazing question. I think every artist goes through a period where they're like, oh, wow, this is very hard. And the people I see on TV or on, the radio, it was a hard path for them and not everybody makes it. But I think again, when you're born to love the arts, it's difficult to not go for it. You know what I mean? It's such a strong love. And I think most vocations are like that. But specifically with the arts, you always need that creative outlet. You always need a space to be yourself and express yourself. So it's hard to not respond to that calling, I think. But yeah, outside pressure wise, it's a good question. Like, I noticed when I was moving schools when I originally became an actress, and I did Zoinked, which was a show on YTV.
I
And
remember seeing that on your IMDb, and I freaked out
yeah,
because I used to love that show.
yeah, and none of that ever registered for me. Like, I was never going into it thinking that, oh my gosh, people are going to be coming up to me or whatever. I just genuinely loved performing and acting and all, just generally film. But yeah, I remember moving schools. It was a bit difficult at that time because I would definitely get a lot of different responses from people. When you say you're an actress, either everyone's like, that's awesome, tell me more, or they're like, you're weird and whatever.
Right.
So yeah, that was definitely something I had to deal with, but you can quickly get over it as long as you're like nice and down to earth and keep your head on straight. So.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, we've talked a lot about all of the things that you've tackled, including having your own company, and I also know that you debate on a national level, which I find really interesting because I do that. I do debating in my own time as well.
Oh, amazing.
So, as a 17-year-old, how have you been able to balance, working as an actress, doing all those other extracurriculars, and also doing well in school? Like, what are some ways that you've been able to kind of deal with all of that?
Yeah, I would say I balanced it poorly. No, I've been very good. When you start off younger, you need to be on top of it, and it's honestly just become like a part of my life now. I'm thankful. I don't know if this was a natural thing or if it was something I developed because I started so early, just in like the working industry, regardless of whether it was film or not. I was always really big on schedules, and I'm big on to-do lists. I'm that kind of person. I think that's something common with a lot of filmmakers. People think that artists are usually really flighty, but a lot of it just is so dependent on managing a good schedule. And I think my main thing that's helped me so much through all of that, because I mean, Lord knows I am a busy person, and I really don't like stopping. I'm one of those people that just constantly needs to work. I think the main thing with that is you really have to, and this goes for anybody struggling with any schedule, you really need to know your own limits and listen to yourself. So, like, I know, for example, I work way better when I'm in advance and I do bits at a time. Like, I'm not a all-night studier, night before kind of person. And when you realize things like that, you can be like, okay, I need to force myself to do work at this period of time and really just plan it out from there. But I think most of it's about listening to yourself. Like, I've definitely had times where, during exam season, I was filming Endlings pretty much full time, and I was just being called in randomly in certain days, and then some where they just were like, can you please come in today during my math exam? So it's important to keep people, keep everybody informed about your schedule and just being ready for anything, really.
And have you found that your school extracurriculars outside of acting, have they been more so accommodating with that and your kind of like spontaneous scheduling?
Yeah, I always feel so bad to impede on any of that for any people at school ever. So it's definitely a little bit stressful. I think the most helpful thing, if other actors are listening to this or people that want to be actresses, it's important to just keep everybody informed. Like, I go to a super academic school, and I used to go to an art school, and they were cool with anything. You could go for a week and they'd be like, we totally understand, we've dealt with this many times. But yeah, at my school now, it was super different for them. So I had to be really in touch with the administration, with every single club coach, email them all 2 weeks in advance if I knew, tell them about my circumstances and how it's super random.
Well, I mean, good for you for figuring out how to navigate that, because I would kind of probably just crumble.
You definitely, once you're thrown in, and I think a lot of this is about just human beings, when you're thrown into a situation where you need to get something done, it happens, I think, for most of us. So it's definitely taken a long time. I mean, I started when I was super young, and I definitely wasn't dealing with it well back then. But yeah, I think it's all about knowing who you are and what you need.
Did you have any sort of like support system that you established to kind of help you get through those types of things?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, specifically in the film industry, you just meet the best people. And when you're younger, and how do I explain this? There are a lot of people that you really cling on to really quickly. So I've been in touch with some folks from when I filmed like my first feature film when I think I was like 11 or something. And when I see them at auditions now, it's hugging and it's like kissing on the cheek and how are you and everything. So there's definitely an amazing support system that comes like with any arts industry, I think. And that's really helped guide me throughout everything. Like, I know a woman I worked with on my first short film, the one at Whistler, she introduced me to one of her friends later on. And then now that friend, Morgan Davidoff, helps me build my entire website. And she's been mentoring me through pretty much everything with zero compensation. Like I just help her with her media stuff, and she helps me with my website. And so there's a lot of that. And I think that's so amazing about our industry, that everybody's really willing to help most of the time. Obviously, you're going to have bad apples. But most people that I've met in the industry have been great guiding forces. And then a lot of people that are kind of into the stuff that I'm into at my school. I get really close to my teachers, and they're excited to hear about my life. And yeah, so, and my parents obviously are, specifically my mom is probably, you know, the stone that holds everything together. So she's helping me with everything. She's running the lines. She's, you know, driving me all the places when I couldn't drive. Well, a little flex there. I can drive now. No, I'm kidding.
You're gonna add that in there. No, yeah. I mean, even like personally, obviously nowhere near as extensive a career as you, but I mean, this past year I've finally gotten myself to a point where I'm starting to actually officially work. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna add that in there.
She drives and she just got signed.
That's right.
What can I say? But no, I mean, you're right. I did not even realize how valuable those connections were. In like, because you'll meet one person and you'll think, oh, maybe I met them in a class, or I met them in an audition, and you'll be somewhere else, and that same person could introduce you to someone that could give you another huge opportunity. And it's like building that connection. And I mean, obviously, yeah, you've had many years to build those connections and see that network grow. But even just for me in the past year of doing so, I never realized how valuable that was. And
I mean, this podcast is a perfect example. Like when I met you, we were just, it was literally so small. Like I was just like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, hey.
We were both freaking, for those of you who don't know, we were actually freaking out over an application that we sent in. And I think I texted you first.
Yeah.
I was like, I had no idea who she was. I think I met her at they did like a hangout for applicants. And I was like, hi, I know you don't know who I am, but did you like happen to get anything? And she's like, oh yeah, but did you get anything? And we were like going back and forth, like checking my spam folder and seeing if we got anything.
It's crazy.
But I mean,
and now it's this. Now I'm, you know,
now we're here. Yeah.
You're creating opportunities for me. I'm, you know, I'm happy to be here. Just kidding. They're holding me hostage, guys. Blink twice if you need help. Oh, this is a podcast.
We can't say that. We're live.
Yeah. Also, you guys can't see me blink twice if it's just audio. Anyway.
That's awesome.
But yeah. 100%. It's a great community to be a part of. And you can find that really anywhere. I mean, people are really open to it in the arts just because it's so collaborative. But I think if you're going into any industry, the one tip I would give is to not be so overly focused on networking. Just be aware that you're trying to build real connections. You know what I mean? Because I've met some people who are just like, hello. And it's like, you can read right into that, you know?
Right.
But as long as you're open-minded and you're connecting with the people you actually, you know, feel something with, right?
Right. Yeah, of course. So moving kind of on from, you know, we've got to know you, your background, and your clearly amazing passion for what you do. You know, how did this all culminate into BRYYZ and like this entire multimedia website and all the stuff that you do? I know you were mentioning, or, you know, when we were doing our research and looking into everything, it was a lot about activism. You actually mentioned in some information that we were relaying to each other, it was focused on the intersection between art and activism, or media and activism. So how did the two relate for you, and how did that even culminate into what BRYYZ is today? Yeah,
so actually with BRYYZ, I had this plan a long time ago to just start a media company, originally because, you know, it's changing a little bit, but when I first started in the film industry, I got a lot of limited roles for women, and I think a lot of POCs have the exact same issue. It's like, not the exact same, obviously, but, you know, there's an issue with film and just diversity in general. And I wanted to hear voices that I think were important and diverse voices so we could get everybody's perspective. And so my main propeller for starting my own company was just the fact that I was like, I'm done waiting around for, you know, roles or, you know, a creative opportunity. I want to make it for myself. And I think a lot of people that have been kind of struggling in the film industry for so long, being such a, you know, like male-dominated space, unfortunately, and such a limited space, that it's important to create those opportunities for yourself. And I've, you know, even Issa Rae, she created her own production company. She's a big inspiration of mine. And I just think that's so awesome. She started the show Insecure just out of her own, will. And so, yeah, BRYYZ originally was because of that, just because I saw a lot of the issues in the film industry, and I wanted to create media and art that included everyone and that spread messages I thought were important. And as far as the relation of media and activism goes, I would say that art is a reflection of the time, right? So when society is going through something, art translates that and reflects it back into your face, really. It's like looking at a mirror. And I was always drawn to it for that reason. I think, like Jasmine said, I do debate a lot. I've been a debater for a very long time, just because I love discussing things. I love, discussing politics and issues with the world. As horrible as that sounds, for some reason I love it. And I found that, yeah, right.
It's fun. It's fun,
like
yeah.
it's totally like a toxic boyfriend. I'm like, oh, it makes me so mad, but I always go back because I love to.
That's so true.
Right. And yeah, so I noticed in debate, as great as it is to discuss something with somebody, it's different when you're speaking to their heart. And when I watched a film about something I really didn't know about, or music, I mean, music is a massive inspiration for me. I don't know if any of the listeners know this, but specifically Joey Badass's album, All American Badass, I listened to that once it came out when I was younger, and I was like, racism, I think I understand it now. I mean, not fully, but it's hard if you're white to fully understand it, but it was such a turning point for me, and it made me so much more aware about, what other people were going through. And so for me, art is that, and there's such a massive intersection between art and activism for me, because it speaks to your heart. It changes your perspective in just such an internal way, and I love that. And something that I've heard from other creators is that art reminds us what it feels like to be human, and when it really comes down to everything, reminding what it's like to be human is just the ultimate thing. Then you you're in touch with your kindness and your empathy, and you really understand where to go from here.
I think that's an amazing motivation. Why don't you tell us a little more about BRYYZ altogether, because we didn't speak too much about what it is. What are some initiatives that you've done to kind of promote the type of activism and change that you've spoken about?
So BRYYZ is a multimedia company, and there's a media section where I post my films. I'm been in the works with other people's films to publish on the site. Other people can publish their stories that I approve. So I have a lot of writers that speak to me every so often. I publish those, and there's so many sections I need to think. Poetry is also on there. And then the do good section is really where my heart is. That's the activist section. So I have a bunch of initiatives. My first initiative was the Semi-Formal Outfit Recycle Fund, which was girls donated a bunch of their dresses to me for free, because girls constantly buy 12,000 dresses for one semi-formal dance, which I discovered recently, and I only bought one.
We can confirm apparently this is true.
Apparently there's 5 fast fashion sites that just spew out these dresses. So I thought there has to be a more sustainable way to do this. And a lot of girls that I've met over the years couldn't afford a lot of the really bougie, expensive dresses that some girls had. So I got those donations and I sell them on my site. Unfortunately, this year there hasn't been, just because there's not semi-formals. I think that it is unfortunate, even though it's still, functioning and working and everything's up. But next year, I think that it'll have a bit of a bigger impact, even though it's, doing really well right now, and I'm happy about it. And then the second initiative is my refugee awareness project. So this one I love so much, because I noticed specifically in Western communities, we really everybody compartmentalizes. You can hear my voice so much, so I get worried about saying the wrong words. And, wants to place people in boxes. And I think refugees generally get kind of a bad rap, especially from what I've experienced in Toronto. And so I went to the UN General Assembly, and I reached out to a few people, and I landed an interview with Mizuno Malahan, who's a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. And she has an amazing story. She's a Syrian refugee, and she literally, there are accounts of her, she's an advocate for girls' education, and there are accounts of her carrying her books with her, across the borders. She's just through and through an activist, and I think she was probably 12 when that happened. So she has a fantastic story, and it was important for me to broadcast that to my community, because it humanizes them. I think we look at people in just a big heap of a group that's doing this one thing or this couple things, and that's dangerous. We need to see people as individuals, and they're navigating harrowing circumstances, and it's important to see that and recognize the kind of resilience that comes from that, and how so many people are doing amazing things that come from all over. So yeah, that was my second initiative. And if you buy any of the things on my shop on BRYYZ, all of it goes to, 20% of it goes to refugees struggling. And then I recently started a new line that goes to women that have suffered from human trafficking.
That's incredible. And you will be able to find all of Brielle's socials and the BRYYZ website link in any descriptions or anything that we link to this podcast. So please make sure to check out her website. Like she was saying, I don't even think gets to half of how amazing what she's done in with her company is. And I know that you mentioned it's a platform. You take in a lot of other artists' work or surrounding activism and things. But I noticed that you do your own work with it in a lot of different things. So is there a specific piece that you maybe feel you're most connected to or that you are very, very proud of in this respect?
That's such a good question. I never think of things like that. I'm never like, oh, this is the epitome of my artistic work. But yeah, I specifically in the video gallery, that section is really important to me because I think I see a lot of the world around me just visually and see, wow, that was a sentence. I see a lot of the world around me visually. Write that one down to your quote book, folks. No, but I think my brain works really cinematically, and so the video gallery is important to me. And my favorite piece, it's probably not what you'd expect. I'm excited to get my short film on there because that is my ultimate favorite thing that I've made. But my favorite piece is probably the What Memories Feel Like video. I created that from a bunch of the memories of my sister because she was moving away to university. And yeah, it's Frank Ocean's in the background, and it made me feel so nostalgic. And something I love about having all my work on my site is that I can kind of relive those moments and, remember different portions of my life and exactly how they felt. So I would definitely say that is a section I love. And the art gallery, I did a photography essay, a photo essay on gender roles. And that's basically how we're more similar than we are different, and masculine, feminine. Obviously, there's just a large spectrum, and there's more similarities than there are differences. So that was kind of, and you'll kind of get it if you see it. It's difficult to talk about photos for me.
We're going to have
because
visuals kind of
so
going.
Visual.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
So you'll be able to have a frame of reference. Don't worry.
Let me describe every detail of this photo to you. No.
I also think it's amazing how diverse your art range, art forms are, because I know you focus on mainly acting, but you also make videos, you do photography, you're also into fashion. So how did you kind of branch out into all these different types of arts? Did you take classes for them? Did you how did you discover all of these different things?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I have an answer in my head, which would be, I think every artist just loves every art form usually. I think that naturally I was probably just because I've developed in the film industry for so long, I think, again, my brain kind of works cinematically. That comes really easy to me. But I think music is really where my heart is. And, photography is similar to film. So that was a relatively easy switch over. Yeah, but then that was the answer in my head. But if I really think about it, my parents, when I was younger, I was in, guitar, vocal, plays. Yeah, they really just signed me up for everything other than drawing art. I draw a little bit, but it's total bleep. Yeah.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sure every artist experiences all those different branches to some extent. You have to pull from different areas, right, for everything. So.
Right. Yeah, of course. And I want to go back a little bit also on, you were talking a little more about your piece because it just brought up to me and I would really love to hear about it. The idea of gender roles. I know that's something that you talk about actually a lot on your social media as well, and you've expressed that is something you're very passionate about, and I am so happy to hear that because it is definitely something that's close to my heart as well. Has there, if you're willing to share, have you come across any instance or anything particular, maybe even in your art field, or your experience with the arts that drove you to become so passionate about that?
100%. Yeah. I think that a lot of people assume that the arts industry is really open and accepting, which is somewhat true, but it's important to note the fact that there's a major impact that film, photography, music has on a human being. It's one of the most influential things ever. I think when, Jaws came out, the fear of sharks rose to top 3 or something, when before it was at number 27. So there's no doubt that these industries make a massive impact. And originally, with the Me Too movement happening, that's something that I think every woman in film has struggled with. Something that really sticks out to me when I was working on a set, a woman, I was like, I see you on everything. In Toronto, you're just like the actor to choose. And she was like, that's because no other Latina actresses really want to stay in the game. She was like, when she started, there were many. And then as she went along, she was the only one that really survived or was left, because at some point, women, and specifically women who are minorities, it's so difficult to find a role that you actually think is, meaty or interesting, or even get chosen for something, because it's so limited. And if you put that in the bigger picture, it's like all the media we're consuming is from pretty much like a straight white male perspective. Sorry for the trigger. I love straight white males, gotta say. They're awesome, but I just mean generally, like, you have to hear from so many different inputs. So many different sources. So when I heard that from her, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a massive problem. Like, if you're the only one left and everybody's been discouraged, the discouraging isn't just not getting roles, it's also like there's a massive sexual assault problem, I think, in most industries, and the film industry is not immune to that at all. Like, I remember when I was younger, I think I was 12. Like, I think a full-grown actor told me that if you sleep with the right people, you can get ahead. And I'm like a 12-year-old girl at work. Yeah. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, and going back to gender roles, I think that, and I talked about this a little bit before, and part of my photo essay speaks on this, we really like to see the world as black and white. We fit people into boxes, we fit things into boxes, and the biggest barrier humanity really, not the biggest barrier, but a massive barrier humanity needs to overcome is just to say, no, not everybody is part of this massive group. Like, women aren't all the same. Just because, like, one man is, like, scientifically logical doesn't mean that all women, like, are just flawed in logic.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we do that so much. So a lot of that is just understanding that there's such a diverse array of people, and that everybody operates well in different spaces in so many facets. Like, a lot of people will say that this is why men occupy STEM, because they're analytical and they're less emotional. But then it's like so many characteristics of a woman, being compassionate, being a great communicator, compensates so much of what is a leader, So you can't, it's just not proportional, in my opinion. And I think you can see that in a lot of industries, and specifically in the arts, it's definitely been a massive issue.
I feel empowered already, can I just say? I'm like, I can do this now. Brielle said I can do this. I can do this. Oh my gosh.
And it's so changing. Like, anybody listening, it is definitely changing. I can see it, as it happens. It obviously should be going quicker, but it's important to think about the positives.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's such an important issue. And the fact that you can deal with that through, or I guess express your passion for it through your art form, I think it makes everything just kind of come together for full circle. So that's amazing. You did actually touch upon something I wanted to ask you about, which is STEM. And this, whether it be male or female or just in general, especially you mentioned you go to a very academically inclined school. How do you deal with that stigma, that stereotype that if you don't go into STEM, you're not going to be successful, or being in a STEM field makes you intelligent as per societal notions? Like, how do you deal with that as an actor and artist?
Yeah, 100%. I think so much of my life, aside from the arts, has been I love academics. I'm like low-key a little nerd. No, I'm kidding. But I do, like, I love, history and math. Like, there's just so many things part of academia that I'm really drawn to as well. So I've definitely struggled with that. I also think specifically, again, going back to the being a woman thing, what I've noticed is that a lot of the times, and this really goes for, I think, any person that feels slightly disadvantaged, that you're constantly fighting stereotypes. So I feel as though when I walk into a room, I'm constantly having to say, oh, I'm smart and this is why, and I'm funny and this is why. And you know what I mean? You're constantly proving yourself when, somebody who maybe doesn't have those barriers can just be like, say one joke and everybody's like, he's the funny one,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed that a lot. And I think with intelligence, that's definitely something I've struggled with since like a long time, since the beginning, because being in an arts field, people really assume that it's not, intellectually rigorous, which I think is so not true. One of the reasons I'm drawn to film and the arts is because, again, like, I love academia and I love challenging myself and, my intellectual capacities in every way. And I think art challenges you in so many, change alongside art, but it challenges you in so many different ways. So yeah, especially because most people in my school are going in, they're either an engineer or a lawyer. That's it.
I was gonna say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We're living the same life.
Yeah, so I definitely think, and even women that go into STEM and minorities, there's such a massive barrier between, you know, this is why you can't do this, and this is why I'm going to assume things. And I don't think that it's necessarily always so obvious to most people, but when you break it down, it's like there's so many subconscious just biases we make towards people that really don't deserve them. So definitely, if you're an artist and you're listening, you are not a dunce. You're very smart, and I've dealt with the same thing, and it's difficult because I have felt like a bit of like I'm always trying to prove myself in a lot of different areas. I think a lot of people struggle with that. But it's just about being confident in yourself and really understanding your strengths and applying them when necessary, you know? And I've learned that, I think, mainly through debate. It's like being a critical thinker is so important, and being mentally agile in so many different areas and flexible is like just a massive thing that people totally overlook. And being smart exists in so many different areas in so many different ways. And I think right now, mainly with the education system, we overlook a little bit of that. And I think that STEM fits really well into a category of like what we see as intelligent. And I think a lot of that's true, but it's just about, you know, including other forms of that into education and biases, and I'm not incorporating into biases, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think like arts can even be viewed as something that is slightly more difficult compared to the STEM field, because the way that you have to perform things is so different than getting an equation correct. Because if you do math over and over again, you'll eventually get it. But when it comes to things like acting or drawing or music, like there's no right way to do it, because it's on a different like level of
It's on a different level.
It's on a different, really, like I feel
We're
like
just
it's
like mainly
separate.
superior. No. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that like a lot of, specifically, like something that I always think about are these amazing, like, you know, the epitome of artists. Like you think of people who have just reached pure excellence, and you're like, how could that possibly not be associated with anything that's smart? And I think same with them. Like if you're an amazing, you know, Elon Musk, that man gets credit up the yin yang. You know what I mean? Like he like everybody's always hyping him up. And I think a lot of people are doing that with other artists in other fields, but it's just not to the same extent, you know, which is crazy to me, because so many, when you reach excellence as an artist, I think you can't not be smart. Like it's not just something that comes out of you, you know what I mean? And I think people in the lower levels of every field are pretty equal in that way. Because again, our brain, like our strengths and our brain function in so many different ways. And right now we think so linearly in those terms.
Yeah, no, definitely. You're right.
And I think one of the important things about being an artist as well is like the business and the marketing side to it. So I was curious, because you have your own company, you also do just so many different types of things that I'd assume is heavily involved with business as well. So did you take any classes for that? How did you kind of learn to manage all of those really heavy things as well, like when it comes to all the initiatives that you're doing?
Yeah, I think such a huge lesson that I've learned over the years, you know, being in film and just loving, you know, art in general, has been, when you love that field, the emotions are tough not to get to you at times, you know what I mean? Especially, and both, I think, you know, I won the lottery. Art and activism are both like the most emotional things you could possibly get into, like it's the biggest like heart investments.
That's true.
And so I would say like my biggest challenge throughout creating BRYYZ in general is that so many issues that I think passion is awesome, and it's something that like I'm unfortunately full of in so many different things, but it's also a bit of a burden, because you think, when I get so invested in an initiative or an issue and I'm arguing with someone or I'm discussing it and I can't really get to where I want to get, it's a very frustrating process. And even with art, trying to convey what you want to convey and having people not misinterpret it, I've experienced that a lot, where you know, it gets misinterpreted and you're like, oh goodness, that was not the intention at all. And, you know, so you definitely have to be really aware, but also just confident in the fact that you're human and people are going to make mistakes. And we're losing sight of that a little bit nowadays, in my opinion. And it's just important to realize that you can learn from your mistakes and move forward. And also that challenging yourself is like the coolest thing you could possibly do. And trying new things is the coolest thing you could possibly do. And most of the lessons, this is so cliche, but it's honestly true. Like most of the lessons I've learned just because I failed. Yeah, or like just like constantly making things. Like I don't think everything on my website is 100% gold, but like because I've made so many different things, I notice myself getting better in a lot of different ways. So just being confident in that process is key.
I am in awe every question that we give you, how wise you are, really. I mean, I don't know if it's applicable to say,
That's
but
nice.
I mean, it really is. You have so much experience, and you use that experience to better yourself. And I think that's what so many youth creatives may even struggle with, is that feeling of, for one, the pressure of not getting into it and going to a more stable route, or two, just getting into it and not knowing what to do. How do you express yourself? How do you make meaningful change? How do you make those experiences mean something to you and to
Because it's not
anyone
a
else?
straightforward, it's not like you go to university, you come out, you get a job, whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's all about practice.
And so I think the fact that you've recognized that, and you've been able to apply it not just to your art or to your activism, to everything else in your life, is truly like a service, really, to everyone. So thank you for what you do.
Thanks.
No, really, it's amazing.
17, which is like, it
Yeah,
just
I
blew
need
my
to
mind.
I need to get off my butt and do something, really.
Oh my
First,
God,
when Amber-
complex.
Like when Amber told me about you, I didn't know you were 17. I thought you were like a full grown, like an adult,
my gosh.
because of all the work that you've been doing. So it's honestly very
That's so
inspiring.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And seriously, like it's this type of stuff that honestly keeps me going, because and I think, what I said before, it's so easy to let everything get to you. So it's so important to just encourage everybody and be kind over everything.
That's amazing. Well, before we get to our last little bit about advice, because obviously that is what we're here for. We're benefiting or trying to benefit our youth, next generation of artists. I do have a personal question to ask you, because you and I are, as we know, film buffs. We're both very much into film. So this is a two-part question. One, I want to know your favorite film and why. Jasmine knows my favorite film, and I'm not going to go into it because that's a 2-3 hour conversation we're not going to get into. But
Can you say the name?
Film. Of course, The Godfather.
Okay, right.
You
You don't even have to explain that one, really.
Thank you. See, Jasmine, you see this? This is the appreciation for
I
cinema.
understand. I really should watch it now. I'll go watch it today.
Yes, I better make you. No, so I want to know your favorite film and why, and maybe if that had any impact on your experiences or anything like that. And two, who is the coolest person you've worked with? This could be someone that is like very well known, or someone who you just think is like an incredibly amazing person that you just had the privilege of being able to work with, or no?
Yeah, I'll rank them. No, I'm kidding. I will not do that. I love you all, if any of you are listening. So my favorite movie, this is a really tragic, sad, horrible story, and I will tell you why. It is because Call Me By Your Name was such a special movie for me, and it held such a special little homey place in my heart. And then Armie Hammer decided to become a cannibal, and I'm sorry, folks. I get why you like him, but holy smokes, that was the saddest thing I've ever heard in a while.
Yeah.
Like,
When I read the headline, I was like, is this really happening? Like,
I thought it was a joke.
But the fact
Anyway,
that he got not only dropped from his project, but dropped from his agency, like that, there's got to be something else they're not telling us. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. So, not that I think that what he did was pretty terrible. Like, I read his girlfriend's statement, and I have no doubt in my mind that, like, that was not okay, obviously. And so I knew you were gonna ask me for my favorite movie, and it's just so easy for me to talk about Call Me By Your Name because I love it so much. But that was my disclaimer. But the reason I love Call Me By Your Name and the director is Luca Guadagnino.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's a toughie. And I love him so much because he does such a good job of really reflecting the human experience and just taking his time and really just creating the most natural and intimate setting for actors and for images and everything. So Call Me By Your Name, I loved so much when I first watched it, and I've watched it so many times. And anybody who's not a film buff is probably like, how could you watch that movie twice? Because I don't think a lot happens, like, action-wise. But just the fact, and the actors were so good. I mean, Timothée Chalamet is an exceptional actor. I think there's just basically no argument. Yeah, like, he's next level. And I don't know, I just thought it was so good, and it's just so intimate, and he does such a good job of making so much happen and also nothing happen at the same time. And my favorite types of movies are probably things like that. I think my number two, this is actually opposite. My number two movie is Sorry to Bother You. Has anybody seen that? Sorry to Bother You with Keith Stanfield.
Yes, yeah, I think I've heard of it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you would if you watched it, you'd know because there's like cocaine and horse people, and it's a really like it's a
Oh,
soundbite kind
okay.
of movie. But
Interesting.
if anybody's seen that, yeah, I love
Those
how
are,
weird it is and
those are always the best
how
movies, though, let's be honest.
totally. And the other thing I love about movies is when you're like, this is how I think everything is, and then it's like, no, just kidding, reality is this, and you're wrong, and everything's crazy, and I'm like, oh, sweet. So I think Sorry to Bother You does a great job of doing that. And Lakeith Stanfield's on Atlanta, and Childish Gambino made Atlanta,
Oh my
and
God.
Childish Gambino is my favorite person in the world.
He's
Oh,
amazing.
and actually, never mind. We don't have to go. Sorry, Amber, you have the
No,
same
go
disease.
on.
It's like just
I think
ranting about.
it's something that every film buff is diagnosed with. Like seriously, we can't
Yeah.
like it's but you know what?
Totally.
This is your space. If you need to, you need to.
Go for it. We got plenty
Yeah,
of
and as
time.
far as shows, because I was just thinking every time, because movies, I always want to support, the women in the industry, and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and Big Little Lies are two shows that you must watch immediately right now. So just to shout out
I
those
will
creators.
vet that. And that is 100% true. Yes.
You will second that notion. It's so good.
And then the person you
The
have
coolest
met
Yeah.
that's the coolest.
Okay.
You can interpret that word however you so please.
Okay, I actually have to think about this one. Not that I actually didn't have to think about the rest of them. That sounded... Anyway. Okay. Coolest I will interpret in probably not like a super expected way. When I worked on Creeped Out, the director Bruce McDonald, who I loved before I worked with him, he does horror movies and he's amazing. Basically on set, I told him about how much I want to be a director and how much that excites me. And he was amazing throughout the entire process. Something that I thought was so amazing about him is that he's really cool and calm throughout everything. And in film, it's impossible.
Wow.
Like you have to you have to manage so many people, and there's just so many bits and pieces. And something I admire about him is that he was just so calm and so together the entire time. And when I spoke to him about wanting to become a director, I actually got to intern for him after my time on Creeped Out as an actress. And so him doing that was a massive deal for me. And he makes a big effort, for supporting women in film and just really any creative without, any previous notion or whatever, which I think is awesome, and being intentional about supporting people that are really passionate about it. So that was an awesome experience for me. And something else that I thought was so cool about him is that he loves music, and music is probably my biggest inspiration. It's something that I'm so passionate about and informs a majority of the things I create. And he had this record collection that he was showing me and all this really cool stuff. So we were really kindred in that way.
Oh, that's amazing.
Definitely, he was probably the coolest.
Amber, were you trying to ask her what it was like to work with Annabelle? Was that where that question was supposed to go?
Oh, yeah. I was like, ooh. I
That's
actually didn't
hard.
end up meeting Annabelle,
That's
which is
for you.
unfortunate because I had it was such a tiny role. It was still an amazing experience. I wish I could kind of met everybody on set. But unfortunately, I didn't get to meet her.
That's okay. You know what? When the sequel comes out, you'll have your chance. And then
Yeah, can we still be friends? Okay.
of course, I'm gonna be on FaceTime with you, and I'm gonna give you a list of things to ask, and we're just gonna have
Okay.
like a nice chat that way.
I love Peaky Blinders, by the way, so I was
Oh my
fangirling
God,
as
yes.
well. Because originally
you.
I thought I was playing her daughter when I got the audition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Nikolai was a great trade-off. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so.
I think it's really cool to like work legitimately in the real industry. So like what is something really interesting that you've learned working with adults and like people who are actually professionally doing what they're doing? What is some advice that you can give for us who are trying to, make it out there?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think the main thing that I've learned specifically with working with adults is just being an effective communicator. Not that I'm good in any really respect, but I think that that's definitely something that I've had to develop, and just being intentional about my words and, really just being mindful of my actions and what I'm saying and when I'm saying it. And also just there's definitely like a big, there's just a nice like social vibe on set on films. And so if you're not up to snuff in that way, especially when you're an actor, like everybody's always throwing out witty one-liners and funny little anecdotes. So you always have to be kind of on top of it. So that was like probably a smaller thing, but still something that being communication for every artist is a big deal. But for me, with my background in a lot of my other areas, communicating is something really important to me. And then also probably just showing up and being on top of it, because when you're working in an adult industry, you really have to get your bleep together quickly. I'm saving you guys so much editing time with this bleep. No, I'm kidding. But
I know.
but yeah, so really just showing up and being prepared and learning how to stay on top of all of that from a young age was really something that has informed a lot of what I do at school, a lot of how I operate in my everyday world. So
yeah. And then I guess on an ending note, I guess general advice. I mean, we always hear the notion of like, there are millions of people who have the same dream as you. So what are you going to do to stand out? What are you going to do to make it? And that pushes a lot of people away. That scares a lot of people. And people who have talent, people who really are destined to do this, but they don't want to try. So, you know, holistically, let's say, what is some, to the little girl who wants to be a filmmaker, an actress, anything she wants to be in the arts, what would you say to her?
So I would say that we are moving into a space in the world where creatives are going to be like the new foundation of that. And anybody that's going into anything creative, it's important to value that part of your life, you know, innovation, art, really any of that. I think they go hand in hand. But it's important to recognize, especially if you're arguing with your parents about the fact that you want to be a starving artist, it's important to say that there's so many different jobs and so many areas where they want people that are artistic, people that are creative, people that are dynamic and flexible. I think I keep saying flexibility, agility, because being an artist, that's such a massive strength that you have, you know, being able to understand, being able to, you know, stretch your mind in these different places. So number one, cultivate that. If you have it, if you feel like there's this part inside of you that just like, it gets lit up when you watch a movie or listen to a song or look at a painting, then look at that and cultivate it and just practice. Because I'm telling you, even if you don't end up going into the arts, that'll be such an important and valuable skill, no matter what the world tells you going into this or focusing on this is going to do. Art is essential. And I think also, again, like there's so many lucrative areas, and people either think like, oh, you're famous on the red carpet or you're literally living in your mother's basement. That is not the case. Like you can be like, I don't know, marketing director for Adobe Photoshop and make bank as an artist. So there's so many different areas, and it's definitely, and also you can't turn your back from the artistic instincts, I think. And if you do, I in my opinion, that you're doing yourself a disservice. So definitely cultivate that, practice, and know that you have a lot of options.
Is there anything that you wish you knew before getting into working? Because I know you started really young, so obviously there's probably a learning curve, I'd assume.
Oof. Okay, I want to think about this one because, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hard work, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of different people. And I think the main thing that I probably didn't know when I was younger is that, you know, you're going to get a lot of different stuff thrown at you, right? So you always have to be ready and always be really aware, you know, like getting into the right situations and really maximizing the opportunities that you have, not taking advantage of them, but maximizing, I think, is the right word. So yeah, definitely before I'm going in, I would say that it's going to take a lot of your time and it's going to be a lot of hard work. So be ready for it, but it builds resilience and it'll help you in the long run. And just, you really should know that you're going to have to be ready for a lot of different situations because the film industry is the most dynamic place ever. And you get the most random bunch of people that are awesome, but you know what I mean? Like you're always going to, you just have to be ready.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess on that note, thank you so much, Brielle, for being with us today, for talking to us, for sharing your wisdom. Again, we keep saying it, but only just at 17 years old. I mean, you're making waves. You are going to, even just in the future from where you are now, you are going to have such a profound impact on this world. I mean, it's going to be amazing.
Thank you so much. And you too as well. I mean, like, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I'm so excited to see what you guys make in the future. And to anyone listening, you know, if you meet a random chick on Instagram, reach out to her and say, let's do this together.
Throw stranger danger out the window at this point.
Exactly. 100%. So thank you so much, and I just appreciate this so much, and I'm so excited to stay in touch with you too.
Oh, well, it's our pleasure, really. And you can find all of Brielle's social media links, the link to her BRYYZ website. Please check her out, check out her work, and go support her and show her some love. And I think with that being said, we can end off episode 2 of Off the Charts. Please make sure
for listening.
Yeah, please make sure to follow us on our socials and keep an eye out for our next guest on the 3rd episode. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.